there's like a lot of emphasis on community building right off the bat. And yeah, I think if you're not afraid to like maybe fall or make a mistake in front of somebody, that's gonna allow you to, I think, learn more quickly because you're actually gonna do it. And I don't know, I guess build stronger ties with people because you actually like trust them to like make a mistake in front of them.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Takeoff. After a little holiday break, good to see you remotely, and welcome to 2026. See what this year's got in store for us. It was a pretty good year in parkour last year, an interesting year, at least outside of parkour, and hopefully this year is as good or better. We'll see. But I do know that this week's guest is pretty awesome. We've got Ruby Romero, and if you're unfamiliar with Ruby and you're thinking about turning this episode off, strongly encourage you not to because she has an awesome episode. So she's a coach at the Movement Creative, and we really get into a ton of things around fostering community in this episode. I think there's a lot of really actionable takeaways if you are a community leader or if you're just interested in learning how to communicate about parkour to people who are maybe outside of the sport or even inside the sport but adjacent to your community. You want to communicate with them a little better. Ruby's got a lot of awesome points in this. She's also a local leader with Brown Girls Climb, which is a climbing nonprofit that promotes access and opportunities for women of color in the climbing community. And we jump into, what she's learned from working with them, how much that has translated to her work in and around parkour. And it's just a fascinating conversation. I honestly learned and was reminded of a lot of things during this chat, and I hope you are too. One of my biggest goals for this podcast is that I've been trying to expand maybe like where people in the big bubble that is the parkour community kind of get their stories from and who
Mm,
they talk
mhm.
to. And I've really enjoyed seeing all the stuff that you've been sharing over the last year or two of working with Brown Girls Climb. So the first thing I wanted to ask you was, would you mind giving me a quick little elevator pitch about what exactly it is and what you do with them?
Mhm. Yeah. Brown Girls Climb is a, like you said, it's a national nonprofit working to get women of color, genderqueer climbers of color climbing inside and outside. So I'm a local leader for New York City. So I lead monthly meetups. We work with different gym partners to negotiate discounted day passes that include rental. And then we typically have leaders that facilitate like climbing sessions. So we'll teach intro to bouldering, intro to top roping, or just belay people or just connect other people to, like, climbers that look like them.
That's awesome. That's pretty much
Mm.
what I got from the website. Do you feel like you've been mostly living in the indoor or outdoor space, or do you kind of just do everything right now?
Um, the outdoor season for climbing is so short here in New York. We go from it being, like, super cold, to super hot, like, pretty quickly sometimes. So I feel like just now we wrapped up the climbing season, so I got to be outside a lot. I got to go on, like, um our annual outdoor day for Brown Girls Climb, but also being in this space has introduced me to so many other like nonprofits and just organizations of people that love to climb and have facilitated partnerships with brands like Arc'teryx, like and they're a big one. I feel like they've thrown a lot of money at climbing right now, so it's helped like just small grassroots people. There's a Dominguez Corporations is a group that I've gone out climbing with, One Two Boulder, Amigas Who Climb, there's Latino Outdoors, there's Rise Outside. Like there's so many of these groups that are facilitating things outside. So I'm really lucky I've been able to be outside a lot.
That's awesome. I still have never been to the Gunks. I'm very jealous.
It's it's really nice that it's so close. It makes it's world-class climbing. You feel like you're at a climbing gym, but you're outside. It's just like pitch after pitch of like top roping. There's tons of bouldering. It's pretty easy to get to from New York City, so it's super nice that that's like the home crag for a lot of these organizations.
Yeah, have you felt like you've seen in your experience like some major differences in from when you started to now how the people who come in maybe think about climbing or relate to climbing?
Um, well, I think. I think it being in the Olympics put it like on this global stage. So there was definitely an uptick around that, around that time, which was, yeah, so like last year or last summer, there's like a big uptick of people just interested in it. And um, I don't know, I think there's also a few gyms in New York City, and like in Brooklyn and in Queens that have been putting on exciting events. So I just find that it just keeps on growing. It attracts all different kinds of people and it just like keeps growing.
Yeah, does it tend to be that most of the activations are geared toward people who are new, like it's their first time, or is it more like a repeating community of folks that just kind of come in for the first time and then they're weekly doing something with the group?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Like we had a meetup last week, and I think we had 3 people who had never climbed before, and then another like 8 intermediate people. So it's a little bit of both. It's a lot of people like bringing their friend for a first time. Like if you've been climbing for a long time and you finally get your best friend to join you, there's like a lot of people like that. And then just people who have been climbing for a while that want to come and meet other people.
Nice. I'm really excited to hear about this. So I'll go to the parkour talk in a second because I think
Hmm.
that is knowing me exactly who's listening. Hopefully some of the folks that know you through the climbing world as well are listening to this, but what I really find interesting, as you know, I'm sure through your work with Movement Creative, is that a lot of the problems of representation, not all of the problems obviously of representation, but some of them, um, I think are almost universally applicable to getting people into parkour because it comes with this sort of like social stigma and burden of representation and
Hmm.
misunderstanding. Like folks come in with all sorts of connotations for what they think parkour is that you don't know and you're fighting from day one.
Hmm.
So, do you feel like you've from working with Brown Girls Climb and getting to see so many people who maybe didn't see themselves represented in the outdoor space and then start to establish that relationship and see other folks who look like them and can help lead them in that journey. Do you feel like you have seen anything that translates to how you maybe coach parkour with Movement Creative or how you have kind of started to think about organizing events in parkour?
Mm, that's a good question. I think, yeah, there's like the Venn diagram of like parkour and climbing is like it's so close. Yeah, like the social stigma is a big one. I mean, I think representation in general is important. It's why I continue to coach parkour. I think you have to see people that look like you to like feel, I don't know, just to see yourself in a sport, you have to see people that look like you. I feel that way about it. It's a little bit harder if you don't. It's not impossible, but it's harder if you don't. Um, wait, what was your question? Do I find like parallels?
Oh, I was gonna ask if you'd had any takeaways, and I should probably use this as an opportunity to point out that I think that the one-to-one that I'm making is not that, uh, the representation issues that
Hmm.
many women of color experience trying to get into climbing is how anybody feels getting into parkour. I think that's obviously
Hmm.
not the case, but I do think that there's lessons that you, maybe have learned about how to communicate about climbing with people who don't
Hmm.
see themselves potentially as climbers. And I was wondering
Hmm.
if any of those lessons you saw and you immediately were like, oh, Eureka, this is such a nice way to maybe help people who wouldn't see themselves in the parkour space start to digest the idea that they could try parkour also.
Hmm. Mm, let's see. I I don't know. I feel the opposite. I feel like I'm like it's easier for me to help people to get into climbing because I've been doing parkour. I approach like the first day of like a climbing session with people the way I would approach like the first day of a parkour session. Like this is really hard. We're making it look easy. It's not easy. Like it's a big coordination effort. Like there's some strength involved, but it's also coordination. So I feel like I take all of like my sound bites that I'm constantly saying when I'm like coaching parkour, apply that to a climbing gym, and I think that helps people become a lot more comfortable climbing. So maybe like that is the takeaway, that like that
That's so cool. No, I would
experience
not
is
have expected
universal.
that. Yeah. No, that's
Mhm.
really interesting. Well, I also wanted to ask you, so I don't my pet peeve in parkour podcasts is every single parkour podcast starts with, "So how did you get into parkour?" And I'm like,
Mhm.
I do wanna always talk about that, but I'm like, "Dude, can we just skip that as the first question at some point?" I do
Mhm.
think in this case, though, it is really relevant because you mentioned how important visual representation is, and I do think that, like, growing up in the New York City community, while it's not representative of the diversity of New York City, which would be very hard to do. It definitely
Yeah.
is one of the more diverse global parkour communities, I would say.
Mhm.
But when you got into it, how did you get into parkour? And when you got into it, did you feel, I guess, the pressure of the representation issue's not the right word, but the pressure of maybe not seeing a ton of people who looked like you in the community at that time?
Well, so I started my first ever parkour class was with the Movement Creative, and it was taught by Jesse and Nikki at Lululemon. So I think like the fact that it was at
That's the
Lululemon,
bougiest first parkour
yeah,
experience
yeah,
ever.
yeah. And I went after like spending the day at the beach with some girlfriends, so we all went, so there's like I showed up like with like three other women at Lululemon. Nikki's teaching it. So I don't think that's like anybody's typical first parkour experience. I
So
think that's
Movement Creator's
told
doing something right. That's great.
yeah. Yeah. So I showed up and I was like, oh man, this is so much fun. And then, I think my second session was at Rockefeller Plaza, taught by like Andrew Suseno, that was doing like a little bit of contact improv and parkour. So it was like really weird. It was really fun. It was like very dancey. That was like my second session ever. And I was like, man, this is great.
Get the
But
full
again, I don't
spectrum.
think that's like everyone's. I didn't show up to parkour gym and like the like the record screeches and like I look and it's just a bunch of shirtless dudes, like that wasn't at all my experience.
Yeah. I think
Mhm.
Nikki, for those who don't know, Nikki Zanevsky, was also to me, actually, I think she was at my second ever jam, and being
Mm.
a 14-year-old kid, and that was also when conditioning was a big part, more a part of parkour training and parkour jams, then
Mm.
than it was now in, like, 2007, and I remember being like, "I'm pretty strong," and just getting blasted by a Nikki conditioning workout.
Mhm.
So, I I think that that is really great that, yeah, she was there for the first one, and I think having that experience, whether even when it's not seeing yourself in a person, but maybe seeing from you're seeing the other, right? And being like, "Oh, I have a maybe as a 14-year-old, a certain perspective about how a woman might move in parkour," and then just being like, "Jesus, dude, that was totally wrong. Like, that's crazy."
Mhm.
That's that's awesome. Do you remember what you did in your first training session?
Um, there was like a giant scaff setup, there's like a giant scaff setup. There was jumping. Also, I was wearing the wrong footwear because we had just come from the beach and it was like very like spontaneous. Um, so yeah, I just remember like a big scaff and a lot of like jumping around games, obviously, um, vaulting, just like the basics.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So what kind of do you remember if anything hooked you in particular? Like for me, I remember the feeling of balancing on a rail was like crack cocaine to my 14-year-old brain. I just remember how that was just the thing that I'm like, I want to get amazing at this. This is so cool. But was there
Mhm.
anything in those first couple sessions that brought you back?
Um, I think the community was a big part of it. At the time, like I had been doing martial arts and I had kind of like was looking for like a new gym, like a new activity, a new sport, like right around that time. And yeah, it was the first session was great because I got to do it with my friends that normally do capoeira and like, never wanted to do like the things that I really wanted to do. So this was like a good like middle ground for us. And then after that, like yeah, I think the community, like every person I met was just like fun and playful and or super strong and skillful. So I think there was also like a few other people that I'm still friends with to this day that it was their first like week or month or first couple of sessions. So I think yeah, that was a big part of it. There were a few of us that were new to it. Everybody was enthusiastic and just welcoming.
That's awesome. I'm gonna
Mhm.
ask you to put your coach hat on now,
Mhm.
because I think that something that I've always really respected about Movement Creative, which is not indicative of how I train, is how open-ended and community-oriented the sessions are. I think when I was coaching, sometimes I would even find that frustrating because I just wanted people to do like a bunch of running rail precisions to stick or whatever. And I'm like, why are we doing contact improv? Blah, blah, blah. But I do think that it's a testament when you look at the movement creative community now
Mhm.
and how diverse it is across gender and age and ethnicity, and socioeconomic status, basically any variable, right? Obviously, you guys are doing something right. So, from your perspective, what do you feel like movement creative does well, or maybe even uniquely, that helps make parkour fun for people?
Hmm. I mean, I think we lean a lot on games as a way to like get to know each other, that's like, for summer camp, like the first thing we do, the first like hour, we're just focusing on getting kids comfortable with each other. They're about to spend like an entire week hopefully doing something that requires a lot of like bravery and courage in front of kids that they don't know. So there's like a lot of emphasis on community building right off the bat. And yeah, I think if you're not afraid to like maybe fall or make a mistake in front of somebody, that's gonna allow you to, I think, learn more quickly because you're actually gonna do it. And I don't know, I guess build stronger ties with people because you actually like trust them to like make a mistake in front of them.
Yeah. This might even be something that's so internalized that you don't even explicitly say it, but also what I just heard there is like the first focus is on bringing people together, not on the movement. And just in how you explained like what the goal is for the week, right? It's how can we
Mhm.
make people comfortable with each other? How can we put them in a space where they're ready to learn because they feel like they can lean on each other? Do you feel like that is true for Movement Creative, that it is just as much about encouraging the sense of community as opposed to what the people are doing in the community?
Yeah, 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 definitely. I mean, one of our taglines is like building community through movement, and I think like every session like fully embodies that. It's not just talk.
Yeah, that's true, and I also will point out that those kids should definitely get to know each other before Mike is, pulling them off of all kinds of obstacles and stopping them from running around through New York City streets for a week
Yeah.
because I've been to those camps, man, those get crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna go on the subway together, we like have to know each other's names and faces.
This is true, yeah. That's true, New York does present some interesting I mean, I love the programming, so this kinda ties back to what, what a little bit with what you're talking about with Brown Girls Climb, where it's kind of the accessibility of indoor climbing to outdoor climbing and how there is kind of a pipeline that, indoor climbing brings people in where they can learn the skills in a less intimidating place. I think something that Movement Creative has done really well is create, especially for kids, so many touch points, right? I mean, like Parkour Adventure was one of my favorite programs to coach in New York. And for the
Mhm.
listener, like that was a great program where we'd go to schools and kids after school program would be going to a local park and doing parkour for an hour and a half or two. And you'd pick them up after school and walk there with them to the park and do a session and then walk back. But how do you feel like you've seen maybe people's perspectives, and that could be inside the community, it could be parents, it could even be the coaches. But as you guys have added all these touch points from your first Lululemon boutique parkour experience to now, do you feel like you're seeing kind of the fruits of that labor in the way that people engage with parkour in New York or even inside the movement creative community?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many kids and families that I met when at their first after school, their first parkour adventure when they were like 5 or 6 years old, who are now like teenagers in our programs, or like 8-year olds who are now teenagers and working with us. We've had like countless
Shout out
parents talk
Ori.
to us. Yeah. Yeah, like we've had countless parents talk to us about how parkour has like changed how their children carry themselves, how they um who they hang out with, like how they're problem solving, how they approach challenges, how they view themselves, like it's deeply impacted so many children and families, and it's so cool to be a part of that.
Yeah, where do you hope where do you hope to see that going? If you had to say, if you had to articulate an end goal for you with the relationship that parkour has with people in New York City, what would be
Mhm,
your vision? I know Jesse's vision. I'm not
mhm.
interested in that one, but
Um, I guess like the overall vision that I would like for people to have to like take away from parkour is just to like try something new. I think like going back to this like don't be afraid to be like vulnerable in front of people. That's how we learn, like making mistakes, doing things, iterating. That actually now because okay, now I thought about like breaking the jump and that whole process and how everybody should know how to do that.
there could be multiple takeaways. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
cut you down to one, but
Yeah, but then I guess problem solving is maybe like what this is all leading to. I guess how you deal with problem solving might be my final answer, my final takeaway here. What I would like people to take away from parkour.
yeah, do you feel like do you it's been a while because I've not been able to come back to New York for a couple years because I had a kid,
Mhm.
unfortunately. Those darn kids will keep you busy. Um, but I felt like New York was always such an interesting place because it is so everything is there. You
Mhm.
can not find there's nothing that exists in the world that you can't find a version of in New York City, probably in like a
Mhm.
10-block radius, basically.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it always felt very almost particularly uninviting to parkour. I don't know why that was, just like the average person seemed very unprepared to deal with it, and then when I moved to Denver, it's almost the opposite here, where Denver's got kind of a very particular type of person who lives here, but parkour fits really well into the expectations of the city. Like, I can go on rooftops in the middle of the day and I've literally never been talked to. And in New York, it's like you
That's
climb on a
wild.
4-foot wall and somebody's like out their bodega yelling at you or like hollering at you from the fire escape in 10 seconds.
Mhm.
What what do you feel like I mean, do you feel like is that just a New York thing? And in the context of climbing, I guess let me continue to kind of articulate this so I can actually get you a real question.
Mhm.
Climbing has changed a ton, even in the
Mhm.
last like 10 or 15 years in terms of how people see it. Do you feel like there's anything that the climbing community has done to make it more palatable or I guess accessible um, from like a community building standpoint or just like a communications and marketing standpoint that you think that parkour could learn from? Or are New Yorkers just too rude and loud to change? I love the
I've
rudeness and loudness for all my New York friends listening to this. I miss it.
I mean, I've thought about this. Yes, parkour can be I mean, New York has very like I think the term hostile architecture, I don't know if it was like invented
Mm,
here, but it was definitely like perfected here. There's like a lot of hostile architecture here, meant to keep people off of things. And I think one of the things that climbing has is time. It's a lot older than parkour. I mean, people started climbing mountains in like, I don't know, hundreds of years ago, like as a sport, like a
mhm.
hundred years ago, like as a leisurely activity about 100 years ago, or maybe more than that. I'm not sure. Um, Parkour is a lot newer, so I think climbing has a lot of like time on its side. I think it also has like these big brands behind it, when again, I love Arc'teryx. They've been doing so much for the parkour community, but like their ultimate goal is to get people to buy Arc'teryx gear. They want you to buy their pants, their shoes, they want you wearing their things. So I think that that kind of like attention is really
Mhm.
helping the sport. If you can maybe get some free swag from this brand that happens to be hosting a free climbing meetup, it's going to attract a bunch of people to it. I don't know what the parkour equivalent of that is. I think if
Do you
we
feel
if we
like
could.
that's like a chicken and egg thing? Because in the Arc'teryx or in like many of the brands, and this probably ties back to the time thing, but in that example, right, it's like I if parkour had, for instance, this is something I brought up or talked about with Wenson the other day as well, is kind of the importance of like branded content because unfortunately, we do live in a world where probably the vast majority of someone's attention is like determined by whatever brand they see that's paid to get their eyeballs for that
Mhm.
amount of their day on social media or advertising. So in climbing, do you feel like it's a symbiotic relationship where the brands are supporting events like the ones that you've talked about with Brown Girls Climb, and then people see that and it's like, "Oh, the money's there, the opportunity is there thanks to this brand, so I'm gonna show up." But simultaneously, Arc'teryx knows that if they do it, there's an established community of people who are just looking for that opportunity. Do you feel like parkour is there yet, or do you feel like we're still in the building the established group of people who are waiting for the opportunity phase?
Mm, yeah, I think there just isn't like quite the right like brand alignment yet. I do think we're like getting a little bit closer. There's so many brands out there who are trying to appeal to like authenticity and like ruggedness, and like we're getting so close, but we're not like quite there yet. And maybe it is just like a time thing. I think I'm hoping that like some brand pops up and they're like, oh wow, we make gear for people who are looking for this very specific thing. Like let's support them. But
Yeah. We
yeah, I
make
don't
pants for
know.
people who are sliding down sheet metal
Yeah.
rooftops
Yeah.
in all
We
types
like
of weather.
reinforce like the balls of the feet. Like these, we have these special insoles.
I thought you were gonna say reinforced butt flaps on
But
jeans,
yeah, also
like the
butt
old
reinforced butts. Yeah.
we could go like
Padded shin
lumberjack.
guards.
Phew, now we're going LA old school Jesse LaFleur gear. No, it's funny. I'm like, this is gonna turn into a marketing podcast, the amount that this comes up, but it's really interesting and this conversation I was curious because as you were talking about how you kind of do work with these brands to help organize events, and obviously you've done that with Move NYC as well.
Mhm.
Have you noticed, like, I'm assuming yes. Have you noticed a different amount of leverage that you have in a conversation with an Arc'teryx coming through Brown Girls that climb versus coming from the movement creative? Like, do you feel like there's just a totally different power dynamic when you're having essentially the same conversations there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, also Brown Girls Climb is like a national nonprofit, like it also has like this very, very big reach to it.
Mhm.
Which there are very few parkour organizations that have that kind of reach,
I'll
unfortunately.
say
Or
0.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess zero parkour organizations, unfortunately.
You raise a
So
valid
that
point.
yeah, so like that, just like having that kind of like recognition uh
Mhm.
is a totally different conversation. Also, you never have to explain to people what climbing is, you know.
Do you feel
The
like you still have that conversation when you're raising for something like Move NYC?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for
That's
sure.
really wow,
Mhm.
okay, that's super interesting. I have almost forgotten what that's like. Again, and this is like one of the interesting things about how hyper local parkour still can be.
Mhm.
um, because to me, I feel like the New York scene has been doing so much great work and is so out there. I mean, like, even years ago, coaching a workshop at Lululemon, like, that's a very, very cool thing. So it's interesting to me that that still comes up, but,
Mhm.
that's fascinating and kind of a bummer.
Yeah. I mean, or, or they've only ever watched like The Office clip or just jump to like, yeah,
Classic. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the
Hmm.
I guess that and that's kinda when we were talking about earlier, the representation thing where you're trying to have a conversation, you're like, "We don't even necessarily know that the word that we're using here means the same thing to both of
Hmm.
us."
Hmm.
That's always challenging.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, I was gonna ask you this anyway, and this kind of feels like a good time. What misconceptions do you feel like you see as a coach, or even in the situation that we just described? Like, what are some of the common misconceptions that people come in either as a student or when you're talking to them about sponsoring an event like Move NYC with?
Um, I mean, I guess one of the biggest misconceptions is they just think about like people jumping on roofs. Like I don't like that's still that is like brought up all the time. And it's like what like how do we even get up there? Like it's New York. Like what are you talking about? How it'd be tricky to get up to somewhere with an entire class of people like if we tried, you know?
It's expensive real estate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Like, you think
like
we're renting that rooftop out? No way. And
yeah.
there's alarms on it, unless you're in
Mhm.
Chinatown. Maybe you can get away with it there.
Yeah. So I think that's definitely like one that I regularly come up against and have to like say on the phone, when I'm talking to a potential, somebody's well-meaning parent who's just like, "What is this?"
Yeah, we're not gonna take your 8-year-old on the roof of their school,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
probably. Well,
And then
do you feel like the demographic misconceptions are there as much as they used to be, or do you feel like you've done and you, in the general sense of movement creative, have done a good job where I mean, like, you have the Tuesday sessions.
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of times when I would go, it was almost 50-50 pretty regularly, which is amazing because I think on a broad scale, parkour is heavily skewed male, like probably
Mhm.
90-10, unfortunately,
Mhm.
if not more. But I do think New York is one of the strongest communities in terms of representation.
Mhm.
Do you still feel like that's something that when people come into a session, they are expecting it to be like, "Oh, this is gonna be a very male-dominated space," or have you kind of seen that change?
No, I've definitely seen that change. I think people are expecting it to be a lot younger. Like they think it's going to
Mhm.
be people in their like early 20s and it's like no, everybody's like there's a lot of people in their 30s, there's people in their 40s, there's people in their 50s. So I think that is surprising to people. They are expecting it to skew a lot younger. And it's like no, our median age in our class is a lot higher.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One, thing that I would not have anticipated is similar for, like, my YouTube, Point A's, and Instagram. I think the average viewer is, like, 38 years old.
Mhm.
So, it's funny because it's like, okay, parkour's peak popularity per Google search was probably
Mhm.
2010, and those people
Mhm.
all just got into parkour and then stayed fascinated with it, and then
Mhm.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that the newer generation definitely seems to not show up to they don't maybe they're not as drawn to kind of the more formalized style of education. They're going on YouTube for self-taught stuff like we did back in the day, which is cool, but yeah, that's probably something that most people don't expect. Well, one thing I do wanna ask you also from both what you've kind of picked up with Brown Girls Climb and being more involved in the climbing community, and now that how long have you been coaching with Movement Creative?
Um, I started in like 2019, 2018.
Okay, out
Yeah.
yourself. So 7 years of
Yeah.
coaching, you've
Yeah.
gotten to see it really build out.
Mhm.
What would be an area of growth that you see? is I think we've talked a lot about all the great things that Movement Creative has done that maybe differentiate it from a lot of other programs in the US, but where do you feel like you guys could still grow?
Um, I think, I mean, like Movement Creative specifically has started growing a lot into the space of just like older adults. Um, my mom was here, she was visiting in early September, and we have, like, like a little barcade out back, and at first she was, like, joking about it and was like, "You're crazy, I'm not gonna do parkour." And then she, like, struggled getting in and out of our bathtub, and I was like, "This is actually, like, a mobility issue that we could very quickly solve if you, like, hold on here and here and just, like, get your leg over and practice that a couple of times." And then why don't you also try like coming up to this platform and then like coming down and seeing how that feels? And like, why don't you go under it now? And I was like, basically just like tricking her into doing parkour and doing some mobility work in the back. And it was immediately helpful for her. She like felt easier getting in and out of like a deep bathtub. And as somebody who is also growing older, like I want to be able to do the sport. I'd love to do the sport like in my 60s, in my 70s. It's actually why I started climbing as well, because I thought I could do that like into my 80s. That's the goal. So yeah, I think it'd be really cool to grow into like helping older people just like with mobility issues and like the fall prevention. I know like Nancy was doing a really great job of that down in DC. Um,
Yeah, Nancy
and
Lorentz.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So that would be really cool to do.
That's very cool. Do you see anything in other sports? You kinda just said a little bit about this in climbing, but, is there anything that you look at in other sports from the sort of culture or community building aspect that you would like to see reflected more in parkour?
Yeah, I mean, my family's from Mexico and like everybody plays soccer from like tiny, tiny babies to like very like older people. I think soccer's so good at that, you know. That so I think they're really good at having this like super diverse age range where, I'm sure you can get like your 3-year-old into a soccer class. Um, so I think just making it more accessible to broader age ranges would be cool to see that.
Yeah, do you feel like that's partially because soccer is seen as something that you can play it's very not it's very non-goal oriented in, like, a casual way, like, it's very, I think, acceptable to go out and play soccer even if you're not very good because you just enjoy it, and I think even in the US, actually, probably particularly in sports that are more popular in the US, like baseball and
Mhm,
basketball,
mhm,
pickup basketball is a little more common, but you're not if you're really bad at basketball, you're not gonna go to Tompkins Square Park and be like,
mhm,
"Yeah, I'm gonna go and play 10 games of pickup," but I feel like it
mhm.
in the case of soccer, that's a great example of a game that is you can kind of find a pickup game at all levels. Do you feel like maybe I guess, what do you think the reason for that is? And then would there be a takeaway or equivalency there for parkour?
Well, I mean, I
There's
think the
also a
reason is
million
like,
people who do it. So
yeah, yeah, I think like the familiarity aspect
yeah.
is a big one. What would be the equivalent of parkour? Like, if you could just show up to a park and start, like, jumping on things, and then, like, you attract other people that are jumping on things, that would be actually so cool if you just start working on a jump and somebody comes up next to you and it's like, "Hey, what are you working on? Let me let me
It's
do this
funny
with you."
because well, and you say familiarity, and it's like, yeah, joke in a way, that's like a very dumb question, right? Like, well, why is the most popular sport in the world more accessible? But also, what you just described, it's fascinating to me because, like, there is, right, an alternative timeline where functionally anybody could do exactly what you just said. Like,
Mhm,
you showed up to your first session, you didn't even have the right footwear on, like, you don't need anything with you to
mhm,
do that scenario, so I do find it really interesting that in some ways, like, I think it's funny because we talk about that as, like, almost like this, like, far-fetched hypothetical, and then there's the other side of the spectrum where it's like, "Well, no, but it is so accessible, like, you literally
mhm,
could just
Yeah.
have anybody come and do it, and a 6-year-old could come up and jump next to it's actually cool because I go to playgrounds even more now as a dad than I did before I was a dad, just by
Mhm.
going regularly to playgrounds as a grown adult with
Mhm.
no kid, uh,
Mhm.
and it's funny to see how like, what movements are acceptable for the parents to do at a playground and what movements
Mhm.
are seen as unacceptable, even in Denver, which is, like, I would say, pretty alternative city, like, everybody here either climbs mountain bikes, snowboards, or skis,
Mhm.
and yet, right, like, a kid, whatever, climbs up the slide, if you're an adult and you wanna, like, scale up the side of the playground, it's a little weird. It's like it's not as weird as it would
Mhm.
be in some other places, but it's still a little bit weird, whereas,
Mhm.
like, sitting on a swing, totally normal, and I do think
Mhm.
that that's one of those funny things where it's like, "Oh, wow, we really do just, like, tier ourselves to allow certain movements and, like, completely gatekeep other movements, even when they're, like,
Mhm.
basically the same level of difficulty."
Yeah. Yeah, like, why is it more normal for just, like, the parents to sit on the side, like, on their phones instead of just, like, literally just jumping right alongside their kids? Like, why is that more
Yeah.
normalized? Why is that, like yeah.
Yeah, I love that about the Mel McQueen story about getting into parkour is that she just basically got it through osmosis. She just kept sitting at the Apex, gym while her kids were doing parkour and eventually was like, "I'm
Yeah.
bored, I should just try this."
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, that's
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 awesome.
the dream. Well, I
Mhm.
will, ask you one more question, and I
Mhm.
hopefully prefaced you with this, but do you have one piece of media that you would recommend to the listener? It could be a book, movie, podcast, anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's not at all climbing related though. I mean, I was
That's
I
totally
was
fine.
I was trying to think about it, and then I was listening to Bernie Sanders on Trevor Noah's podcast just before this, and it was just such a good listen. So I would recommend that.
Nice. Did you take a shot every time he said, "We're the wealthiest country in the history of the world"?
No.
Because that will I've debated doing that whenever I listen to a Bernie podcast, so it'd get you
Yeah.
pretty I'd need the non-alc the zero proof shots for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Bernie Sanders with Trevor Noah. That's a good
Mhm.
recommendation,
Mhm.
particularly, with the current political climate that we're in. I'll always love a good Bernie listen.
Mhm. Mhm. He does a good job of
Awesome.
just, like, explaining how he got here, and it's just, like, factual yeah, I think he's good at that.
Yeah, and Trevor Noah is a blast to listen to with literally anybody, so you
Mhm.
can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Well, Ruby, thank you so much for taking the time to be on this episode. It was a blast, and I really appreciate having you.
Yeah, thank you so, Max. It was really nice talking to you.
I got a lot out of this one, and on the re-listen, because it had been a little bit of time, I had almost forgotten how interesting this conversation was and some of the turns that it took that I really wasn't expecting. And for me, that's always the most fun, is you kind of go into every conversation in general, but especially in a podcast, sort of anticipating what people are going to say. And I really enjoyed how often Ruby surprised me, in really great ways. I think the Lululemon story is maybe my all-time favorite first parkour experience. That's just, like, mind-blowing to be like, "Oh, yeah, well, I learned it at a Lululemon pop-up." That's, like, a only in New York type experience that just made me laugh so hard. But there's so many good things in here that I really wanna kind of continue to take to heart when I introduce people to parkour. The overall theme that I got out of this one is just create a space that people wanna spend time at, right? Like, I am so bad at over prioritizing maybe skill because in my own practice, like, I've always been very excited about getting stronger and getting more technical, and I love parkour and practicing the movement. But for a lot of people, that's the second priority, and the first priority is just spending time with people that they like to hang out with. And I think something that Ruby emphasized that the Movement Creative does so well is that your gym or your program or your local sessions should first off be places that people just want to hang out. And then second off, they can be places maybe where people get better. But like Most people just wanna hang out and have fun. They don't necessarily care about reaching their maximum potential, and that is fine and great, and we should absolutely embrace that and, continue to promote spaces where that is encouraged and people wanna hang. So, if you got anything out of this episode, I hope that was it. Got a couple very interesting guests lined up for the next few episodes. I'll see you next Tuesday. Have a great week.